I'm joined by my friend Chad. We've played together here in the Chicago area. Chad is a skilled performer and an instrument tech. I'm looking forward to hearing his perspective on a lot of different stuff. Welcome, Chad. Do you wanna talk a little bit about yourself before I start grilling you?
Well, let's see. My name is Chad Taylor. I live in Ottawa, Illinois. I'm about 2 hours southwest of Chicago. Strangely enough, I actually started on clarinet and still do it as a doubling instrument with a lot of the big band stuff that I do. But my primary instrument when I got into college actually switched from tenor saxophone to bassoon, and I've been with it ever since. So that's kind of the rough gist of who I am. I've played in the West Suburban Symphony Orchestra for about 8 in some years, give or take, playing fourth bassoon, third bassoon, and contrabassoon. I played with the Symphony of Oak Park River Forest. I sub in the Peoria Symphony. I sub in the Knox Galesburg Symphony, and whatever group needs me to play whatever. So it's a very diversified freelancing canvas.
Nice. Yeah. That's part of what I wanted to dig into a little bit, because your diversity of career has gotten you a lot of different opportunities. I feel like
it's a lot of it has just been, being in the right place at the right time with the right horn, so to speak. But it just it's worked for me, and I realized, fortunately, before the music industry started to slowly and gradually go downhill, that if I was going to survive in this business, that you can't just perform anymore. It's very rare unless you're at that very top high echelon level of playing in groups like the Philadelphia Orchestra or the Chicago Symphony or the New York Philharmonic. I mean, that real top echelon. You just can't make a living off of gigging all the time. You'll burn yourself out and drive yourself crazy doing that. So I had some interest in teaching, and I like it. I will once in a great while still take on a private lesson student here and there. I don't do it as much anymore just because of time constraints. As a primary thing, there's other personal philosophies that I've kind of gotten to at a point where I just don't want to do it. But I started looking at what other opportunities were there, and I'd always been one that was tinkering. I used to tear apart go-karts and dirt bikes, and my father was a semi-truck driver, and I used to help him in my free time with doing, diesel engine work and whatnot. Not that I'm going to say that I'm a diesel engine mechanic, but I know the fundamentals of how to do an oil change and do grease and lube job stuff. So, I had mechanical inclination. And the funny thing about it is when I was when I was in my sophomore year of college, and I was kind of doing some deep soul searching, part of the problem I'm going to kind of go all over the place, so forgive me. I started on clarinet, moved to saxophone when I was in junior high. Mainly because I was really getting interested in jazz music and popular music. And, at that level, you can't be a clarinet player and expect to play in the jazz band. You've got to be able to play saxophone. So I took up the baritone saxophone because of size and costs. My parents kind of said, yeah, you're going to play tenor saxophone if you're going to play saxophone. So got a tenor, played that all the way through high school, and the saxophone was wonderful to me. I played in the Downbeat Magazine Foundation's Upstart Band. I did two tours opening up for the Duke Ellington Orchestra.
Nice.
So I had a lot of great opportunities with the saxophone, but I really didn't know what I was getting into when I got to college. And it didn't take long to find out that when you get into college, you don't play jazz all the time. That's just not what you do. And you're expected to study classical repertoire, play with a classical music setup, and that's that's part of it. And I understand that and I appreciate it. And I loved classical music, but as a tenor saxophone player, especially when you and I were going through the systems, there was not a lot of written literature, classical tenor saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
And you were always playing transcriptions of cello stuff and other things in that tenor range. And personally, for me, that was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to, if I'm going to play classical repertoire, I want to play repertoire that's written specifically for the instrument. Just because from technique and phrasing standpoint, it doesn't always transfer well to a wind instrument, especially if you're doing string stuff.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, it's lovely, but it's just not what I wanted to do. So the classical repertoire thing was just not, it wasn't jiving for me as a saxophone player. Not only that, I was playing on a jazz setup. I was playing on metal auto links and the embouchure that a lot of classical saxophone players, and I've become more solid in my feelings in embouchure, especially for saxophone, that I'm not a big proponent for using a small chamber, small tip opening mouthpiece, and using very hard reeds with a very tight embouchure. I don't think from a physiological standpoint that it's conducive to longevity. I think you're really doing yourself a great disservice by that. Not only that, from an acoustical standpoint, with the acoustical knowledge that I have over the years, I don't think playing a small chamber from an intonation standpoint and an acoustic standpoint is beneficial to the saxophone either. So a lot of my thoughts and my standings really went against the grain of what was expected of me as a saxophone major. Fortunately enough, in high school, I had always been, from even when I started in beginning band, I was always fascinated with bassoon. The opportunity to learn it just didn't come until I was a junior in high school. It's partly because, let's face it, bassoons are expensive, and they're not every school band program is simply going to have them. So junior year, I found out the high school owned an instrument. I talked to my band director. He gave me a couple reeds in an old method book and said, "Here, go learn how to play it. Good luck to you." And that's how that that glorious chase became part of my life. So fast forward to my sophomore year. This will be another strange coincidence in the 6 degrees of separation. My brother had got accepted to Western Illinois University, and I was still going to community college at that point. But when he started his freshman year, I figured, well, let me go meet with the bassoon professor and see what he's got to say. So I got in touch with Doug Huff, and Doug was very interested in me, and he started giving me some lessons. And I started getting I started progressively getting more serious with sporadically taking lessons with Doug. And I found a local teacher in the Chicago Heights area where I was close to living at the time. And I slowly started to make the transition over from being a saxophone major to a bassoon major. I auditioned for Doug. Doug, as you know, he's very impulsive, and he'll say one thing and all of a sudden his interests will start to divert. And the further I got into lessons with Doug, the less interested he seemed to be in me. So my audition with Doug did not go well. I wound up calling an acquaintance of mine down in Normal, Illinois, Michael Dicker, who's a bassoon professor there, explained what happened, and be down here the day after tomorrow. I said, yeah, I can. He said, well, you're going to audition for me. So I packed a bag, drove down to Bloomington, played an audition that I was totally not prepared for. And Michael pulled me into his office. He said, I don't know what happened at Macomb. He said, but as far as I'm concerned, you're in my studio. So I started at Illinois State University and studied a year and a half with Michael Dicker. And at that time, I started to find out how the bassoon was. It's an acoustical nightmare, to say the least. But I also found out that, they're extremely expensive. A brand new Heckel bassoon is over $60,000 nowadays, and the wait list is almost 15 years long to get when you get on the order list for it.
Wow.
But it's still, the thing that's the kicker to it is it's highly customizable, keywork and mechanic wise. And not only that, it's not uncommon, unlike the clarinet, to find instruments that are 80, 90, 100 years old still in active professional use by top tier players. So with all of that, it started to intrigue me more. It's like, wow, okay, here's an instrument that I can build keywork for, acoustically modify to the player's needs. It needs to be restored because it's made out of the most unstable materials that a wind instrument should be made out of. This could be a really great opportunity, and it really hit home when I bought my first bassoon, and it needed a lot of work. And come to find out at that time, because the internet was still not as big as it is now, that there were only 3 or 4 guys that were doing bassoon repair just in the United States. It's like, holy cow, there's a real need for this. So my interest started to segue into repair. And what I wound up doing at the advice of Michael Dicker and Chip Owen, who is kind of the chief bassoon designer out at Fox Products Corporation, I enrolled in I left Illinois State University and went to Red Wing, Minnesota, to Minnesota Southeast Tech, where they have a band instrument repair program. I took the whole program and got a job out in Naperville immediately out of school, and that kind of started the ball rolling. In the meantime, while I was working for the store I was at, I started tooling up at home and buying equipment and tools that I needed to specifically do bassoon repair, and I started networking with people. One of the first ones that I had already established contact with was a gentleman by the name of Justin Miller. He's a bassoon dealer out in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. And I had started doing a little bit of work for him with used bassoons that he would take in, and just doing some odd jobs for him here and there. And in return, he got me involved with other professional players. He paid for me to go to my first International Double Reed Society convention. And I set up a little booth at his, in the room that he was at. And I just started doing free touch-up jobs and meeting players. And one of the people that I ran into was a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Keys, who was one of the top bassoon restoration experts and acousticians in the United States. He and I, it was a strange thing. He came up to me, he was wearing a plaid shirt and a pair of nice pants, and I couldn't see his name tag, but he was just kind of standing over my shoulder watching me and asking me all of these questions. And I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Leave me alone. I'm trying to work. Well, Jimmy, I found out who he was later on. I went to go look at other exhibits, and Jimmy was pretty much the designer of an automatic octave vent system for the bassoon.
Hmm.
Revolutionary thing. He and Arthur Weisberg, and for woodwind players, if you don't know who Arthur Weisberg is, I strongly encourage you to look him up. He was probably one of the most prolific wind instrumentalists in the 20th century. He wrote the book, The Art of Wind Playing, studied conducting with Jean Morel, played all of the Bach cello suites on the bassoon, which is a task unto itself. He recorded the Bach chaconne on bassoon, believe it or not. So just a master of his instrument and just a brilliant man. But he needed Jimmy in order to bring the mechanical development of his philosophies of being able to do octave work on the bassoon to reality. So he and Jimmy came up with this thing. So I went and looked at the same guy that was, needling me with questions and watching me work. Here he was showing this bassoon that he had developed. And I went up to him in embarrassment and I said, Mr. Keys, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be a jerk to you earlier when you were visiting with me. So we got to talking and we went to lunch, and it was almost an instant friendship. We found out that he was also a tenor saxophone player when he was growing up in Memphis, and did recording work for Aretha Franklin when he was growing up and whatnot. So it was just this really cool, it was just a simpatico relationship and friendship that we developed right off the bat. So from there, he told me, he said, if you ever have any questions or want to come down and learn more about bassoon repair, give me a call. You're more than welcome in my shop anytime. So fast forward about a year and a half from that first meeting, I found out I was going to get laid off from the company I was working for. And I called him and I said, does that offer to come down and work with you still stand? He said, when can you come down? I said, well, I'm getting my pink slip on Friday. He said, you be here Monday morning. You'll stay at my house. You'll spend 2 weeks with me, and I'll start showing you what I know. So that first 2 weeks went on to almost an entire summer of going back and forth to Nashville. That summer evolved into 3 summers just apprenticing with him. And I will say this about Jimmy: if it wasn't for Jimmy, I probably wouldn't be both the technician and the person that I am today. I had great fundamental skills coming out of Red Wing, but Jimmy was the one that taught me the difference between just doing an average job to taking it to a world-class job. Not rushing through the job, realizing that if you're doing, if somebody's paying you a good amount to do the job right, pay attention to all of the little details. It's those little details that make the big difference in the end product. And it really gave me an education in developing patience, and that was a very critical thing that I needed. At that time I was 26 years old, and I was an anxious, hot-headed little SOB, and he really, all of that really helped me evolve both as a technician and a human being. And teachers like that are, they're few and far between, but I think that teachers like that are very worth all of the respect and admiration and notoriety that you can give them. So so that kind of brought me to more or less where I am now. So I work independently out of my house. I still maintain a day job for a major music store in the west suburbs, mainly because I have some serious health problems and insurance is expensive out of pocket. So I had to make the conscientious choice to either pay all this money for out of pocket to be a bassoon technician, or be able to live a comfortable life and still do bassoon reasonably do it. So, and people don't realize that even with the kind of crash course history I'm giving, from 2005 to just about shy of 2 years ago, I was really working two full-time jobs. I was doing my full-time job with the previous music store I was working for, but I was also putting 8 to 10 hour days on nights and weekends repairing and restoring bassoons. And I was gigging, and I was still teaching two students. So I mean, I was putting in a lot of time honing my crafts, and it was, I enjoy it. I'm very thankful for the opportunities, but the other thing that became a real reality is I'm not made of armor and nails, and when you're a type 1 diabetic and you're running yourself that rampant, it's going to catch up with you sooner or later, and it caught up with me in the name of kidney disease. So I had to start slowing down a little bit and making some choices on what was the biggest priority. So is it quite the route that I've ultimately wanted to take? No, not really, but I look at it this way. I'm still very successful at what I'm doing. I've worked with and alongside some amazing people. One of my lifelong dreams was when I first heard the Chicago Symphony. I always had Bill Bookman, who's the assistant principal in Chicago. I always loved his sound and I loved his playing. And it's like, God, I wonder what it would be like to work with him. And I've been lucky enough to where he's now one of my regular customers, and I've taken some lessons with him, and I've helped him pick out some of his instruments that he's selected over the years. So to have that kind of opportunity to take a childhood dream when I was 10 years old and say that this guy is a friend, a colleague, and a customer, there's something deeply satisfying and very, very, I'm deeply appreciative to Bill on all of those facets. He really has, it's been a wonderful experience to work with people like that, because you're dealing with the best of the best at that point. And these are people that are putting very high demands on not just you as a person, but the skill levels that you're working at, and yeah, I can, at that point, it's like, yeah, I can do a great job. Now I need to take it to a level where I'm doing a real world-class job, because, Bill is one of those ones where he's fussy enough where it's like, well, I've done everything. He's like, well, I need you to do more because this is not good enough for me. I need it to be better. And it's frustrating. It drives me crazy. There's sometimes a couple of tasty adult beverages and some 4-letter words that will be utilized sometimes, but those are the people that make you a good at your craft. I'm constantly looking for people to challenge me so that I can see how much better I can do something. Those are the things those are the people and the type of people I like to surround myself with, because I'm always looking to step another boundary outside of my box, my comfort zone box, to do a better job. That's the important thing.
That's I love hearing that. This has already been a real valuable experience hearing all this. There's a lot of great themes that I think I've heard across a lot of our interviews with my previous guests. Like, first off, like,
I watched a couple. I don't want me to interrupt you. I did watch a couple of the other interviews, and it's I totally agree with you. This is not, a lot of the things that you constantly hear reiterated in some various fashion it's not just applying it to your craft or your art. It's applying it to your life.
Yeah.
You know, these are all things that, I don't care if you're a technician, a clarinetist, a bassoonist, a kazooist.
Yeah.
You have there is a certain amount of discipline that has to be applied in every facet of life. And if you abide by that and try to make your best efforts, I'm not saying that it's always going to be perfect. We as human beings we're flawed from the moment that we see the light of day. But if we keep putting concerted effort forward, you're going to get results from it. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah. It's great to hear stories like that with you know, people working hard with deep quality work and moving forward and building something great.
Yeah.
Um, and the other element that really pleased me to hear too, the the idea of being open and being a good colleague to people. I know, like,
Hmm.
I've seen my share of kind of snootiness in the arts world, and like, this is our club, our clique, whatever. And I mean, but look where being open and being a good colleague takes people. I mean, it for you, it seems to have grown your business and yourself as a person, like, just to places I'm sure you never expected to go.
If
Um,
somebody told me that I would be doing what I'm doing when I was 16 years old, I would have told them they're crazy.
yeah, I mean, I love hearing that, because I think people, I mean, certainly in the arts, but in general, that you have some pre-prescribed track that you think you're going to live your life on, and
Hmm.
it just doesn't.
Life
It
doesn't go that way. It doesn't. If I look at every single hurdle or roadblock or detour I had to take to get to where I'm at now, I will be the first one to put my hand up and say I took the long and extremely windy and dangerous way. There is there if I, it, But the key to it, and this is one thing I told a lot of my students when I was still teaching, um, do not be afraid to embrace failure. Failure is a very critical and key part of life. And the trick about failure is it's not failure is not a bad thing. The critical part is did you embracing it, assessing it, and learning from it so that there's growth from it.
right.
And I don't think I think people when they fail, they're ready to just say they're just chuck it the hell with it and go and just move on to something that they really don't want to do.
Yeah.
I'll tell people I hit rock bottom more than one time in my truck of getting to where I am, just with the bassoon repair thing. I mean, there were times I didn't know how I was going to pay the bill. I didn't know where my next meal was coming from. I didn't even know if I was going to have a roof over my head.
Yeah.
But every time I hit one of those points, I had to dust myself off, wipe the blood off of my face, and say, okay, where did I go wrong? What do I need to fix? And how do I get back up on this horse and do it again and not get bucked off?
Right.
The
Yeah.
critical persistence, if you're going to do anything in this industry, first, and I will say nowadays, I'm very reluctant to recommend getting into the music industry in general right now, just because of the fact that there has been a gradual decline. I think there are some significant ways and means things can come back, but I have to see how the industry is. You can't expect society to evolve to the industry. The industry has to give up a little bit and evolve with what society wants as well.
Yeah. I
Uh,
agree.
one of my colleagues, and it's kind of sad, and I don't know quite a less. I'm never one to sugarcoat anything, so I'll just say it. You know, the primary job as an artist, and especially in the performing arts world, is, it's it's an entertainment. There's no way around it. It's how you entertain or what you're trying to do from the entertainment factor varies an awful lot. But your first and foremost job is to entertain. And I'm not saying go out that symphony orchestra players need to start wearing rhinestone studded tuxedos and start dancing around like idiots on the stage. No, what I'm saying is you have to find out what brings in a crowd. As a saxophonist that still plays popular and contemporary music, I will say, nothing is more fulfilling personally for me than to go out and play, jazz standards or stuff or my interpretations of John Coltrane stuff. I love doing that stuff, but is that going to draw a crowd, and is that going to put a $1 in my pocket? Most of the time, the stuff that puts $250 to $400 in my pocket every night that I go out and play is playing screaming high notes like Lenny Pickett from Saturday Night Live, and playing Mustang Sally for the 700th time, as much as I hate that song, but it puts people out on the dance floor, out at the bar. That's what people that are going to those venues want, whether I like it or not. So, does it do, like I said, I'm tired of playing Mustang Sally, but at the same time, I'll try to figure out ways to make it interesting for me. If I've got solo space, a creative solo over it to further my artistry of my instrument. Is it the song that I want to do it over? Probably not, but it's still an opportunity to go out and play, show my artistry, and get paid for it. And I don't think every musician, like you said, because of their own personal ego or arrogance, realizes how good we have it to be able to put a horn in front of our face and do what we do. I look at, I'd rather be playing Mustang Sally for the millionth time than flipping burgers at a Burger King.
Yeah. That's a good point. Like, people snub their nose at opportunity. They don't recognize it as opportunity. Yeah. Like, I mean, and I've done my share of, like what I consider similar stuff. Like, I've done a lot with like lessons, private lessons, for instance. And, I have a healthy distaste for families who are just clearly forcing their kid to do something they don't like. But
you don't want to be a glorified babysitter.
Yeah. But there's a certain consistency in that type of work if you're able to do it.
Of course.
And you like, at least for me, like I want to have some integrity as a teacher. So I'm going to try to interject as much quality and value into that, even if the kid doesn't, I don't expect probably 99% of these kids to become like pro players. No. Certainly not when they're like 5th or 6th grade and just figuring out their left hand and right hand. But, to instill, I feel like my job in that case is going to be help instill a work ethic and some personal pride in what they're doing for themselves, some personal responsibility, even just like, hey, if you're in my studio, let's take your own notes. Like, I don't expect mom and dad to take your notes for you. You need to remember what you're doing for yourself, and
it's simply being an accountable human being.
Yeah. The basic human stuff that, who knows if they're getting it from another venue, but while I have you in my, in my studio for a half hour, an hour or whatever, why not interject that? I'd rather be responsible for helping develop better people,
Exactly. And that's a great way to look at it. I've sat and watched and observed, private lessons from other teachers, and especially younger ones that are just getting started with trying to teach. And the biggest piece of advice I can give from that, as somebody that has been a private educator, you have to keep in that entity, you have to keep the human element as almost the first priority all the time. There's textbook way to teach, because everybody's different. Everybody is an individual. Right. Their interests, their mindset, how they process things is different. And it's your job as a teacher to figure out how that person thinks and come up with a relatable way to develop a rapport and a way to get them to do what they need to do as a musician. And I've probably taught maybe 6 dozen students in my lifetime, which is not a lot, but every one of them I found I had to teach them a little differently. Every one of them grasped everything a different way, and it's hard, trying to figure out how a person thinks and how they interpret and correspond and get things. It's not easy, there's none of us come with an instruction manual, so we have to, it's a matter, you kind of have to become a little bit of a mind reader in certain ways, and that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, you cannot, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. You yourself can't totally evolve from who you are as a person. You need to find a way to teach that person, but still be you at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's extremely hard.
I think I get what you're saying. Like, you can't be all things to all men, as it were. Like, and I think in at least in my teaching experience, I understand different teachers communicate differently, and you might get something from one person or another that might not be clear. So I've always been very open, like, hey, here's this teacher in the area, or like, I studied at Western, and I try to refer people back to Eric Ginsberg over there.
Mm-hmm.
I think very highly of his teaching, but he and I don't communicate the same, even though we might be kind of pointing towards the same direction. It's like, hey, maybe how he communicates might connect you some more, or I mean, we're in the Chicago area. Like, there's no shortage of talented people and talented teachers. Like,
and it's a very, I've heard you say it enough times in some of the other interviews you've conducted. It's a very saturated environment, and what makes it harder at that point, when there is so many good players and teachers out there, is you start to have to dig deeper and find what the diversity is from teacher to teacher, what their methodology is, what their focus and goals are, in developing musicians. One of the big things that, at least from a bassoon standpoint, is I don't always agree with, and I wouldn't isolate it to the bassoon so much anymore. I think a lot of players today have evolved more into being very technical players, and everything is very calculated, and there's less emphasis put on developing individualistic sound and style as a player. And I'm not trying, and this is one thing that I've really gotten into some heated debates over with numerous friends and colleagues. I think part of the problem we're in such such a rut with not just even classical music, but just music in general, is it's become very, in my opinion, robotic and sometimes monolithic sounding, and there's no
Yeah.
personality of
I,
the human individual being conveyed anymore.
I agree. Especially we live in this the MIDI age or like
Hmm.
and beyond. Like you can punch all this stuff into a computer and the
Yep.
computer replays at least the shadow of a live orchestra pretty well. Even to the point I've heard like replicated human voice sounds that are very convincing. Like, I mean, and look at technology now that like speech or text to speech and things like that. You don't even need humans to narrate half the time anymore.
Right.
Like, how do we as like live human musicians cope with technology that's skyrocketing in a certain way, and how do you communicate the value of live human performance, as technically flawed as it might be, I like what is how do we communicate that value to our audience,
Exactly. Well, as a generality, I look at one of the best things that I ever heard. I think it was from the movie Bicentennial Man
Mhm.
with Robin Williams in it, and they were talking about it was about the time that the robot character, they were going to start to make him look more human with skin and whatnot. And one of the things I'm pretty sure it came from this movie. They said part of the perfection is the imperfections, and I that I I'm a big believer in that phrase. What I like and what I consider something that's artistic or beautiful may not be the same for Frank Dello.
Yeah.
It could be a completely different thing. So, but that individuality, that uniqueness, those are the things that I put the most amount of weight on when I consider something being done at a high artistic level. How does a certain piece of music emotionally move the player that's playing it?
Yeah.
How do they want to convey it? I don't want to. I used to get so frustrated when I was studying in college. The teacher would stop me. Well, you didn't really taper that note for the maximum amount of what the decrescendo wanted in that measure. And it's like, there were a couple of times I would want to say, but that's how I felt.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want to communicate.
You know, best examples that I've heard from teachers and colleagues is, Igor Stravinsky would change scores depending on what orchestra he was about to go in front of, to emphasize the strengths and the weakness of the particular ensemble that he was going to do said piece in front of. So that, this whole thing is, well, that's not what the conductor wrote. Who the hell knows what the conductor was going to interpret in front of that particular person when they perform the piece?
All right. Yeah.
There's a whole gray area with this stuff.
Yeah. Like, I mean, yeah, that older generations of musicians, they couldn't possibly have been planning for the level of like computer precision of reproduction
Hmm.
that we have now. And the human element is, I think the technology is shaping people's outlook too much on this. Like, I remember when I was in grad school, for instance, we'd listen to each other's playing, talk to each other, and then occasionally, put on older recordings, historic recordings or something like that.
Hmm.
I remember listening to like a Harold Wright recording. Harold Wright,
Hmm.
renowned clarinetist in Boston Symphony and etc. And people were starting, like, I thought it was beautiful sound and like the way he would interpret music. But then I would start hearing these comments like, is that vibrato in his sound here or there, or like, is there, like, they're trying to nitpick these little things. Like,
Yeah.
if those things were not there, how could you tell him from could you tell Harold Wright from you or me or anyone else in the room, other than like the technical correctness? And then what am I even listening to anymore? Like,
Right.
you know, what
I
do
mean,
what do we appreciate?
right. I mean, one of my favorite clarinetists, and some of it has to do with he's a very dear friend, and uh, and I will say it's not the sound that I personally would go for on the clarinet, but the thing that makes me appreciate it so much is it's a very unique sound. Michael Norsworthy is a very good friend of mine. I've known him for years, but one of the last recordings he did, he gave me a copy of, and I loved the literature that he played. Uh, Again, I'm not personally crazy about his sound, but I know that if I put him in a line of 100 different clarinetists, the second that he plays even one note, I'm going to know it's him. He has a very unique, personalized sound. And I listen to a lot of clarinet players nowadays, and I don't hear that kind of individuality in them
Yeah.
anymore.
I I feel like, I mean, it's a complicated issue with a lot of angles to look at it from, but
Yeah,
like one of the things I found, especially because I've done the, you know, the audition circuit for X amount of years, like, and I think part of it is a mentality like I need to be able to play to fit into, you know, XYZ orchestra that's looking for another clarinetist, and there seems to be this idea like you have to, like, there's a monolithic expectation for everyone,
mhm,
but then where does, like, if everyone does that, what's left for the individual? Like
that's right.
what makes you different from, if you know, if 100 of us can play exactly the same, you know, Mendelssohn Scherzo, for instance, like, and all the timing is exactly the same, you know, likely not, because I know I still have my struggles with that to this day, but you know, assuming all the technical stuff is still is correct, technically correct,
Mhm,
like what am I even listening to anymore, and how does the committee choose value between all these people if they're all the
right.
same? You know,
And it's
I
hard.
don't know.
It's hard, you know. And even getting into my wheelhouse of knowledge. It's amazing how the the demands of what musicians seem to want nowadays has even affected the musical instrument designs nowadays. We've moved, you go back to the 1950s. I'll use a clarinet example. The R13s that were built in the 1950s are not the same instruments that are being made now. You play an old 50s R13 that's in good shape, it's not going to play in tune with itself, and you're going to get a scale that's a little wacky.
Yeah,
It's not unmanageable, mind you, but it's
right.
not. You can't just pick it up and blow it and expect
Yeah,
everything to just lock in.
yeah, the player is more responsible for what comes out of there.
Exactly. And I think with instrument design moving more towards this even and just and homogeneous acoustical effect, it's taken away the player's ability to be more expressive.
Mm.
I don't. To this day, even in my selection of clarinets, when I buy one, uh, I buy pretty much the exact opposite of what most players would want today, because I want something that's more flexible. I want something that's going to give me a lot more wiggle room to manipulate and shape the timbre, the quality, the projection, the color of the note as I get it out. And you know, uh, even to go into the saxophone world, my two of my favorite horns were made in the 30s and 1940s. They're sharp as all get up down in the bottom, but if I'm playing a ballad, being able to just drop the jaw and slow my airspeed down, people ask me, man, you get one of the best subtones in the entire world. How do you do that? And it's like, I've got a horn that allows me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Like I feel like at least for the last 20 years, I've seen trends like that in, I mean, certainly for clarinet. I've seen instrument brands where it's just, regardless of where you are on the instrument, it's just right here. Like
Right.
there's no, there's not even the possibility of creating any tension or edge. You know, assuming tuning is homogeneous, which it's often is for the newer stuff, you're forced to be here. Like it's
Yeah,
just you have, I feel like I have no room to do anything. Like
exactly.
and you know, my personal tastes for equipment have trended more towards like a little bit more vintage style stuff, where at least I feel like I have some room if I want to make, you know, if I want to purposefully make ugly sound, or
Hmm.
if I, you know, I mean, like we've played with West Suburban, like, you know, some of the genres go like we'll swing from
It's all over the place.
yeah, and um you know, sometimes you have to be able to produce like a, you know, a mid 20th century jazz sound, and then immediately now we're going to, you know, what, Stravinsky or some, you know, like, you know, drastic swing. Like I I just don't see myself being able to do that with a lot of the newer stuff that just makes you stay in a certain zone, you
You
know.
got to have an instrument has to have latitude. There's just no way around it, in my opinion. You know, people are like, well, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for an instrument where, you know, I'm hitting 440 or 442, depending on where they tune. I got to be able to hit it. And it's like, well, no, you don't. You need to know how to move your airspeed, use your embouchure, and manipulate things into pitch so that you have enough latitude to shape and color the sound accordingly. So, you know, and a lot of a lot of the instruments I just don't think do that. Not only that, especially in the clarinet and the oboe world, the I think there is, and especially with buffet, I think they've gotten to a point where they're just producing instruments, so many instruments so fast, and they're not giving they're not as good as they used to. I heard your interview with Eric Ginsberg talking about the wood, and um, the problem with the wood really is they're making so many damn horns that they're cutting corners with the aging and the curing processes
Mhm.
nowadays to make the wood stable.
Yeah,
You know,
I've heard ways of like kiln drying and things like that.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
kiln drying, people don't realize, yeah, it'll dry a piece of wood, but it's at the expense of resonance. I've read enough studies on the drying process, and not just how you dry it, but the oils and chemicals that you use, that all of that plays a huge role. I mean, I'm one of the believers with equipment that everything affects everything. Why do I say that? Because I have drilled enough holes, I have dried and cured enough bassoon parts, and I have tinkered with the instruments in so many different ways that I can show you little things that you wouldn't think make a difference, that I can cite right now on a bassoon is the neck strap ring. Did you know,
oh wow.
most people think that, that long eye screw that you put in there wouldn't make a difference from night or day on how the bassoon responds. Well, I'm telling you, you can take that neck screw, back it out half a turn, and it's going to totally change how the instrument plays.
That's cool, but also in a way, it's not surprising to me, especially in the
No,
world of minute detail. I
no.
mean, I
Uh,
have I have a sorry, I have a my clarinet tech friend out. He's mostly out east, New York, but
mhm,
when I first met him maybe 20 years ago now, when I was first introduced to Cal
mhm.
Agroman, and he was studying instrument repair, or clarinet repair specifically under him, and the little tiny things he would do to a clarinet to change sound. Like I saw him once, you know, just a little finger square of sandpaper, just like stuck it in the bore, boop, and just drastic change in resonance. I don't know what he changed, but like all the
Well,
little details in that bore.
the bore, the best, one of the best ones that I love to do on clarinets. And people don't think anything about it a lot of times, although it has become more and more of a greater detail. The register tube and the thumb tube for the left thumb. A lot of them from the manufacturer, because they're churning them. They'll produce, 1,000 of those for a day's run of production. And, they're not going to sit there and refine and polish and buff the bore ends of those tubes. And, especially on a register tube, those rough edges, they act as an impedance. And if they're jagged, it's going to cause air turbulence to the air column. And people talk about, well, my high register it doesn't respond immediately. It lags a little bit. And it's like, well, I bet you I can fix that in less than 5 minutes, and I'll pull that tube, go to the buffing machine and smooth off all of the rough edges and get it really smooth and reflective and put that baby back in there. And they're like, holy crap, this totally, not only is my upper register responding now, but even the whole horn feels freer and more responsive. And it's like, well, yeah, you don't have all of this turbulence caused right at one of the strongest air pressure points.
Yeah, and that's right there from.
Right. Right.
Man, this is part of why I do these is because it's cathartic for me to complain about all these same things with somebody who sees them also. I half the time I feel like I'm crazy, like, oh, this bothers me, and like, who else am I going to talk to? But like, I've seen now maybe the last 10 or 15 years, like a whole emerging market, like of people who are like, they'll call it different things, like hand selecting instruments or refinishing instruments. Like, you can't, because everyone kind of knows you can't play one off of the factory floor anymore.
No.
Like,
No, it's disappointing. You would think after, I remember the guy that I apprenticed Bassoon Repair with was a student of Hans Manig. And, we run into the same problems with a brand new Heckel bassoon. You'd buy the bassoon and it wouldn't play right out of the case. And it's still the same problem nowadays with Heckels. You spend 60 grand on and wait over a decade to get the damn thing, and the first thing you got to do is take it to the bassoon specialist and spend 5 grand on it. It's terrible. And it's the same problem. So they still use skin pads. They set ass deep impressions in them. The tone hole, because the wood is not cured and seasoned properly, within a day that it's left the factory, the tone holes are all distorted and warped and need to be refaced again. It's a nightmare. So I understand why a lot of these shops now are offering quote unquote hand selected or professionally set up horns, because they really, if you're going to get a level playing field of what the instrument is, you have to, it's at least got to be covering. There's just no way around it. If you've got a horn that's, that left the factory, it's still kind of covering, but it's a little leaky. And then the next one that came off the line along after it, the wood was a little softer and grainier, and all of the tone holes are really distorted now. And the bore is swollen, shrunk a lot differently. That's not a real apples to apples comparison to assess the quality of a brand new instrument. So yeah, is it more expensive to buy that horn that's been professionally sealed and set up? Yeah, but you're saving yourself a lot more money after you buy it, because the shop is not going to charge as much because they did it already and it's already amalgamated into their price.
Price point.
Whereas
Yeah.
the one that you just bought, you're going to your favorite tech, and because you didn't buy it from them, they're going to charge the premium price for it.
Yeah, all the little business tricks. But yeah, no, I mean, it's been an interesting trend to follow. I know because of some of that stuff I've seen, I've been slow to buy new equipment. Like, just try to keep squeezing out whatever performance I can from my dusty old pair of clarinets.
Well,
Like, I'm just afraid of what's out on the market right now, and how do I deal with, like, I mean, like, for instance, when I get high school students and they like, oh, they want a new R13 because somebody told them that's what they should buy is a new R13, and in like 3 to 6 months the top joint is cracked. Like,
well, and that I as far as my personal selections of new clarinets, with what I've played and evaluated, the market is the clarinet market. I feel sorry for you guys because it's beyond saturated with so many different models of instruments and combinations within those given models now. It's almost you can drive yourself insane playing all of these different makes, models, and trying different combinations of bells and barrels with them now. It's like, oh my
yeah,
God.
accessorizing.
I'm glad I play on vintage equipment. I really am. Just be that as it may, though, and I'll interject one other point. And there are a lot of clarinetists and clarinet specialists will possibly argue with me on this, but I don't care. I'm entitled to my opinion just as they are on their own. This whole concept of a horn getting blown out,
Yeah.
I have some mixed feelings, and I'm leaning more strongly against it, that whole premise. One of the things, at least specifically with grenadilla wood, and this is the preconception with it, is that, well, it's resinous enough as it is. It doesn't need to be reinvigorated or re-oiled with any oil. It's fine as it is. I'll be brutally honest. I think that's the biggest crock of horse shit that's out there. I really do. And I say that because as a bassoonist, I play on a piece of wood that is far less resinous than grenadilla is. And there are horns that, the bassoon that I play on was manufactured in 1937. And I've had several people tell me that it's an excellent instrument. I have had colleagues that play on instruments that are in an excess of 100 years old nowadays. And they are professional players. And if you would think that a piece of maple would blow out much faster than a piece of grenadilla would. So my point being is, grenadilla can be, I strongly believe, depending on what oils you use, because there's a lot of factors that have to be looked at in the type of oils and the type of additives that you use on the wood. There are oils out there with enough resins and fatty materials to fill up all of those dried out grains and resin canals and all of that to reinvigorate the life back into the wood. And that's very true with grenadilla also. The other thing too with instruments, especially some of the horns that are not like 50, 60, 70 years old, the bore does change on them, but somebody that really knows, there's still enough good examples of instruments that you can measure the bore dimensions to, and if there is something that has dramatically changed for the worse in the bore of the instrument or even in the tone holes, they can be refashioned. There are enough specialists out there. I wouldn't say that all of them that do it are experts at it, but there are some out there that know how to rework the bore or rework tone holes to get the instrument to play the way it should. So this whole concept of instruments blowing out, I have a hard time, but I really have a hard time buying into that. That's at least my philosophy. I mean, the two clarinets that I have, I'm playing on a 1948 Selmer N series, and I like that horn an awful lot. It's great for jazz. And then the second one that I have, it's because it's a little tighter bore, and I can get away with it if I have to do any classical or pit orchestra playing. I have a 1967 Selmer Series 9 that I use. It's a little bit more reined in than the N series is. So the pitch is a little bit more stable and a little bit more centered on it. But those are old horns, and most people that would look at me would say, oh my God, why aren't you playing a buffet, for starters? And secondly, why are you playing instruments that old? Well, the wood quality is better. The craftsmanship was better. And thirdly, they're comfortable. The first and foremost thing of why I select any instrument is they're comfortable for my setup and how I play the instrument. That's the first and foremost thing. They allow me to do what I need to do and sound like myself.
Yeah. Oh man. There's so much into that. I'm yeah, like I said, it's cathartic for me because
It is.
these are the
You can drive
things I
yourself
think about
insane
a
with
lot
it.
too. Let me ask you this from a tech standpoint.
Yeah.
Been seeing a lot of the emergence of more and more synthetics. Synthetic reeds. I mean everything from the plastic clarinet, beginner clarinet, on up to what is it called, the green line stuff for R13.
Yeah.
They did what is it? Is it just like an epoxy clarinet? Is that what it is like?
You're not totally far off. And I'm glad you asked that because as I'm sure you've seen through some of my postings, me and my business partner, we offer a synthetic wood composite bassoon nowadays.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very curious because I know, I've seen the technology kind of working its way higher. I wonder where it's going and how is the industry dealing with some of the old setbacks, like, plastic clarinet sounding like a plastic clarinet, or that kind of stuff.
Well, let me before I go into the differences, let's establish the synthetic materials that are used right now. The first one that's been the longest around is hard rubber. There were a lot of hard rubber clarinets made in the 1920s and 1930s. It's a great material to make a musical instrument out of. The downsides of it is it's brittle. It's not only that, due to environmental restrictions and other variables that laws are starting to put in, the formulation for hard rubber has evolved an awful lot over the years now. The use of sulfur has really become a huge no-no, and that's one of the key ingredients that makes the rubber what it is.
Yeah. My some of my vintage mouthpieces have that kind of brimstone yellow coming off, and I don't think it's all from my gross mouth.
No, I play on my clarinet mouthpieces of choice. I play on a lot of Gustav Longinus mouthpieces from the 30s and 40s. I love those pieces a lot. And yeah, they'll come to me either this lovely shade of green or this mottled brown color.
Yeah.
And they're definitely far from being any resemblance of this shiny black material. And they kind of have this sour taste in them sometimes when I test them out. But that's the sulfur, and it's sulfur is an oxidizer when it's exposed to light and heat conditions. So, but it's sulfur is what it is. It's a necessary evil in making the right kind of hard rubber. Brad Bain made that very clear when he started designing his mouthpieces. And our good mutual friend Brad Uffelman finally broke down and bought one of Brad's pieces, and I tried it for the first time, and I did a double take. I mean, his stuff feels like a brand new vintage mouthpiece.
Yeah,
And
I spent a lot of time. We did an interview.
yeah, I saw. I haven't watched it yet.
But yeah, he talked a lot about that, the formulations from then to now, and I mean, his goal was like, I want to be able to produce this stuff today. So he's put in a lot of investment of time and fortune to really like do it to that level. And I mostly for me, like the only reason I haven't jumped in myself is budget. Like I just need to.
It's a good mouthpiece for any single reed instrument. It's a considerable investment. I've got, even as a saxophonist, if I found a good vintage 1950s double ring auto link, I didn't blink an eyelash of chunking down $2,000 for it. So, there are some nice modern alternatives now. In fact, all my vintage mouthpieces, I've safely got them stored where they're not going to probably see many live gigs anymore, because every time I'd go out, I'd get scared to death that my horn is going to get hit and
Right.
it's going to the tip is going to get dinged on it or something like that. So I play on some modern alternatives that I like an awful lot, but even still, those are $500 to $700. It's a lot of money. But if your craft relies on that, and I have to be honest that $100 does not cut it for a good mouthpiece anymore. You're spending money on time that's put into putting on that hand, the hand facing and tip opening. You're putting time into all of the research and development of the casting or the billet that the mouthpiece blank is going to be made out of. So, there has to be, I realize it's a monumental investment, but, like anything, most of the time in this industry, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, the equipment out there is just, there's so much out there, and I really wish I had better insights on how to steer people, just because of the fact that manufacturers are doing all of this different stuff, but I don't always think that they're doing the right things. But back to, we're getting so far off track. I want to answer your original question about synthetics.
That's fine.
So, hard rubber, they started to see the shortcomings with hard rubber, and then the next thing that started to become a big deal in the 1950s and 60s was injection molding. And when injection molding came about, it's like, oh man, we could turn out 100 clarinet bodies in a day just by injection molding them out of ABS plastic. And plastic, it's hard enough, it's a much more stable material, it's cheap, and we can mass produce these by the thousands. And it's a good material, but as you said, it's unbelievably hard stuff. I mean, it is really, if you ever have the opportunity to drill a piece of hard rubber and then drill a piece of ABS plastic, I encourage you to try it and just feel the sensation of drilling it. It's not easy to deal with the different materials.
Yeah.
So plastic kind of reigns the king of student line stuff, but it never took on the qualities of, why is it not as dark and warm as what different densities?
Yeah.
So in the 1990s, now we've evolved where epoxy materials and other resin materials had evolved greatly. And Buffet came up with this idea, well, the wood quality, the wood has been over harvested. We're not getting the aged, older wood like we used to. And so let's try taking, all of the shavings and the dust left over from the manufacturing, and let's make a composite billet out of this stuff. So they take this dust, they mix it with an epoxy material, and they compress it at high pressure. Which, when you do that, you're developing heat, and with the heat, the stuff mixes and melts together, and when you put it in a mold, you can make it into a billet, just like you would, very similar to what you would cut a body section from the trunk of a grenadilla tree.
And then just bore it out and all that.
Yeah, so then it's just a matter of boring it out, putting the tone holes in it, and running it down the line. It's got a very similar density and gravity structure as a solid piece of grenadilla wood. But it's not porous. It's harder. It's much more durable. It's never going to crack because of the resin. It's a much higher resin factor, and the instrument is never going to, quote unquote, blow out. So the composite material, I'm a huge fan of the composite materials. They're slightly brighter because of the resin that's mixed into it, but when I look at the subtle difference, and 5 to 10% in my, that can be a great deal to one person. It could be jack diddly to another person. Players' specific sensitivities vary across the board because of our individual traits.
Yeah.
But what you gain, you can counteract what you didn't like about the material with reeds and mouthpieces, or barrels and bells. So there's enough that you can interchange on the clarinet to change the sound enough to where you can get it in the wheelhouse of what you want. So I think the synthetics are definitely more and more the way of the future. I think they are a vastly superior material as far as consistency, the quality that you can manufacture them to in regards to accuracy. But as far as the overall sonic differences, yeah, there is, but I believe that if you exercise enough time and other variables within your setup, you can find a way to make it work.
Now, the composite that you're working with for bassoon stuff, is it somewhere similar to that? Like
it is a grenadilla wood mix. The resin, I can't tell you, that's proprietary to us.
Fine with me.
It's a little, I will tell you, in comparison, it is a little softer to what Buffet uses for their green line material. Okay. But we've taken our instrument across. We took it before COVID hit. We took it entirely almost across the Midwest and hit a couple of states in the South. And we've had over, I think, 50 professionals play it blindfolded, and they were pleasantly surprised when they found out that it wasn't wood.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I have to believe that, eventually we're going to evolve something that's going to, sound and function, as well or better. It's the, the progression of technology. It makes me curious to see what direction it's going. I mean, because I've seen people experiment with I mean, there's all the metal clarinets, for instance. The historically, I forget who it was. I was sitting down to it was one of the old clarinet fests, but the guy was talking about how he studied metallurgy in college and tried to experiment with making a metal reed. He
Hmm.
said he did admit that he cut himself trying to
I was
play.
going to say that'll tear your lip up pretty
Yeah,
good.
but it was fascinating to me because he had to study a lot of the similar things, like how do things vibrate, how to, because
Mhm.
there's things you like the machining part, maybe you can emulate, but all those other qualities that make something work a certain way, like how do we deal with all those other variables. um I've been anxiously awaiting to see something like an instrument body material that has a little less risk involved, because it terrifies me to pop open my case one day and maybe see a crack that I didn't spot before, and like you know I don't if I have some way to avoid that anxiety, I would like to take advantage of it. So
It's very difficult, but I can tell you this. Excuse me. With instrument cracking, um, and yeah, I understand. We all pick. When we buy our instrument, we buy it for how it plays when it's in the condition that it is when we first buy it. Sometimes, when a crack opens up on an oboe or a clarinet, and even in some rare circumstances a bassoon, I've had some people tell me that my horn actually seems to play better after it cracked, and
hmm,
I can't say that I'm totally surprised by that, because you have to remember too that when you take a piece of wood and you machine it and do all the stuff that you do to it to make it into an instrument, you're putting a whole hell of a lot of stress on that instrument, and you're working it in ways that wood does not want to be processed,
right.
and even after it's all said and done, there's still a certain degree of stress in that horn, even after it's machined. That being said, if the horn was worked in a way that it didn't want to, and it just all of a sudden cracks, and that stress tension, that, let's say, in the upper joint, right above, right in that critical spot, in the top joint where they all love to crack,
Yeah.
that's a lot of stress that's being put on there. And when you relieve that stress level, the horn is not choked up like it was anymore. So, and when it's able to vibrate freely, uh, you're finding that the person will find, they're like, wow, I don't have to work as hard. It's less resistant. The dynamic range is opened up. So I'm not saying go and put your horn out in the cold for
Right.
half an hour and go blow into it and have it crack. But keep in mind, there have been sometimes when a part of your instrument cracks, it may come back playing better. So don't always treat it as though it's the end of the world. Furthermore, and this goes back to what you were saying with technology, the technology for repairing cracks has evolved substantially. Yeah, I still see once in a great while I'll see a clarinet that was flush banded, and
Oh,
people will be like, oh
yeah,
my
yeah.
God, why the hell does it have body bands in the middle of it? And it's like, no, that's not a body band. That was how they fixed cracks back then, and
Wow.
they look god awful. But now with the availability of carbon fiber banding and carbon fiber pinning, uh, we have materials that are less evasive, that are much more similar in their physical makeup properties to the wood itself, and can be worked and fashioned so that you can hardly tell that the instrument ever cracked. I've seen some horns that I could not believe the before and afters. I mean, I saw one of them that one of my colleagues at work did the other day. He did a carbon fiber band, and I couldn't even tell he banded it.
Wow. It's interesting the carbon fiber stuff, because one of my other things I do is the knife stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen carbon fiber and, you know, some other synthetics, but they've kind of risen in popularity with custom knives. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. Like you get, you know, different pins to pin the handles on. Sometimes the whole handle is carbon fiber, so
Yep.
they'll pin it, and it's the handle scales. I'm what's your, because I'm a little afraid of actually machining some of these synthetics. What's your experience been like working carbon fiber?
Well, there's, I'll definitely say, you know, you got to know what you're doing with it. I haven't worked a ton with it yet. Um, Partly with the bassoon one, a bassoon cracks. You know, the maple expands and contracts far more aggressively and frequently than a piece of grenadilla does. That being said, I'm not opposed to trying it, but I have a certain degree of skepticism about trying it on a bassoon. Neither here nor there, though. I am aware that, you know, you don't want to breathe the dust or the
Yeah.
fibers in. So you definitely want to try to wear a mask when you're working with it, and especially working with it on a power tool like a lathe or anything of that ilk.
Yeah.
But you know, I look at it this way: grenadilla wood, rosewood, a lot of those some of these exotic tropical woods that oboes and clarinets are made out of. The dust on those is very toxic. So, you know, you're doing it's not anything that I would want to take the risk or gamble of breathing when I'm working on it. So, you know, put a mask on, especially nowadays when masks are so plentiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it does. It's not going to kill you to put on a set a set of safety goggles and a mask while you're working with the stuff. You know.
Yeah.
But
I got my PPE in the corner of my garage for that kind of stuff, because I've been hit with, I mean, especially working steel, like
yeah,
sparks and dust that come off of that, and then
yep.
I do some you know, Kydex plastic for sheaths.
Mm-hmm.
That has its own, because that like the heat will off gas stuff off of the plastic too. So
Right.
there's a lot of hazards when you when you grind stuff into powder and you know, try to avoid getting poisoned by it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Here's another shop related question. Like, do you have some kind of special setup to manage dust when you're working on stuff like that?
At home,
Vacuum stuff.
I regretfully don't yet, and a lot of it is mainly because of space.
Okay.
It's something you know, later on down the line here, as my own personal business grows and expands, it's definitely high on the priority list. But a lot of times, if I'm working with stuff that I know has certain hazard or toxicity levels, I have to just wear a mask and safety equipment so I don't breathe or get any of that stuff in my eyes. You know, I have I have a huge lathe out and a medium-sized lathe and a milling machine in the third car garage. I have a drill press, a buffing machine, and a couple of benches. So, and in that small amount of space, you know, I have to pick and choose what's critical for me to be able to get the job done right now. So, if things keep growing and continuing, I will definitely have to look into dust collection and particulate collection and whatnot. But at this point in time, I just have to do it the old-fashioned way and just make sure that I'm wearing safety equipment when I work with that stuff.
Yeah. So I had a little bug in my brain to ask about that because I'm, same deal. I'm trying to piecemeal together a growing like knife workshop. Right now, it's really just like basically a cheap belt sander and then piles of disgusting dust everywhere.
Yeah, but with any circumstance, with any shop related circumstance, you have to build your shop as you go. When I started in this business, 16 years ago, I started with a small lathe, uh, and a lot of hand tools that I just picked up here and there and modified as I needed them, a drill press and a bench grinder. That was what I had.
So let me ask this then, because I've had I've talked to several guests who are like a similar story. They've at some point they've started getting into instrument tech, the instrument tech world.
Mm-hmm.
And similar story too, like kind of piecemealing their shop together.
Mm-hmm.
Is there um like a instrument tech starter kit you might recommend? Like I mean, of course, you want to go learn and like study how to do it the right way, of course, but like if
Well,
let's say one day I decide I want to start tinkering with my clarinets, um like outside of the little eyeglass screwdriver that I have in my pocket, like what's what's some good investment tools if I know I'm headed towards opening up a shop? What do
well, the tools that I started with, I mean, being that I went to a trade school that taught instrument repair, they had a specific battery of basic hand tools that they wanted us to buy. And
that makes it a little
some
easier, I think.
yeah, some of it. And as I've gotten out on my own, my thoughts and my perspectives and my specific needs, they've changed, they've evolved and changed over time. And some of my what I feel is was good or bad has changed as I've went forward, is from that basic battery of tools.
Hmm.
I'm not going to give a ton of specifics because I find that every technician, I work at least with woodwind technicians, I work in a shop with 14 different woodwind technicians. And every one of us has our different preferences for tools. Even those of us that work on the exact same horns day in, day out, some of us don't even use the same tools to do the same job. So, a tool, I had this conversation with one of the younger technicians in the shop that I work at during the day, and we were talking about tools for swedging keywork, which
Hmm.
is tightening the hinge tubes around the long hinge rod screws. And she had an accident with one of them, and she said, "I don't like this tool." And I said, "Okay, well, what tools have you tried?" She said, "I really like the collet swedging tool." I said, "Okay." I said, "Why do you like it?" And I made her explain to me why. And she said, "Well, what do you like?" I said, "The tool that you hate."
Yeah.
And, and she said, "Well, why do you like it?" And I said, "Because," and I explained to her, I said, "I like it because it's a compound action pair of pliers. So I don't have a little bit of torque on the handles is going to exhibit a lot of pressure to crimp down the hinge tube against the hinge screw that I'm swedging it
Hmm.
against." So not only that, it's a parallel action set of jaws, so it's getting equal pressure on both sides.
Yeah, not
So
the
you're
like
getting,
this
yeah,
kind of swivel
exactly.
thing.
So, and I said, now, uh, the other tech over here, she likes the collet tool. It's easier on her hands, and it's it's exerting equal pressure on 3 different jaws. So you're getting a different type of drawing and crimping action versus what the pliers do. So, so the bottom line is a tool is only as good as the tech that's comfortable with it. So, at least the essential things that I would recommend, good sets of pliers that are smooth jawed. I will tell you, if I ever see a technician use a pair of pliers on a key adjustment that have teeth on them, I will punch them in the face.
You mean I can't break out my my Leatherman from my pocket and just?
How bad do you want to die, Frank? So smooth, so various different types of smooth jawed pliers are essential if you're going to make keywork adjustment. The next thing, and I would almost say it should be the first thing versus the second thing. Do not underestimate a good quality screwdriver. The screwdriver is going to be your best friend. You're going to use that almost 95% of the time throughout your repair work during the day.
Yeah,
And
I already resonate with that because I'm not a tech, but like that's something I put some money into. That like I keep one in my pocket that's like, I have on that one I have multiple heads because sometimes I'm working on stuff other than the clarinet, but it's got just the right size flathead for some of those screws, and I get I get plenty of like hand space to even
you
for
want
like
the handle to be
thing.
comfortable and balanced. You want the head of the screwdriver to fit the slot almost 95% or better. And not only that, and this is one thing that people don't think of, 2 things I'll bring up that people don't think about: the overall length of the shaft, the blade shaft. Getting into those areas like where the low F sharp C sharp is. You trying to get in there with a little teeny tiny length screwdriver is a pain. You want something that's long enough so that you can get your hand in there and turn it comfortably. And the other thing that I would bring up, and this is probably the least thought of thing unless you're a technician, the quality of the steel that the driver blade is made of. The last thing you want to do is have a stubborn, rusty screw, and the blade of the screwdriver just bends like butter.
Oh man, yeah. I I learned a lot about steel and tempering and stuff getting the knife world, and I've seen my share of poorly made hand tools like that. You go to turn, particularly with the flatheads. Like I've gone to turn flatheads, and the wings just like
they just buckle.
Yeah, I mean, I can't get too upset at myself, except for like having chosen to spend poorly.
Yeah,
but. But in contrast, like the better tools that I own, stuff that's like like high-end German steel, like that stuff goes through nearly anything like butter for me. Like it takes away so much hassle.
Well, and not only that, I mean, WEHA brand screwdrivers are fairly readily available. They're not overly expensive, and the quality of the steel is great on those. The handles I'm not overly a fan of. They're not my favorite handle, but that for somebody that's just doing a lot of hobby work or is just getting started, I'm more concerned about the quality of the blade itself. I'm far more critical about that. You get deeper into this and more involved, or you're going to make a career out of repairing, then you can start investing into more expensive screwdrivers with ergonomically fit handles and all of that good stuff. But for somebody that's just going to do a clean oil and adjust on their own clarinet at home, I can't recommend the WEHA brand enough. They're a great screwdriver for the money.
Nice. Anything else like that you think of? Message me. I'll put it in the show notes. I think
Sure.
people would be
The
interested.
only other one that I can think of that I buy a lot of my stuff from, musicmedic.com is a great resource for repair parts and tools. They'll deal with anybody. The quality of their stuff is great. And Burries Tools up in Battle Creek, Michigan, is the other place that I do a lot of business with. They've been around for forever.
Okay.
They were one of the first instrument supply shops uh, that ever graced the face of the earth, and they're good people to deal with. So I use a lot of their pads quite regularly, and their prices are very reasonable. So
Yes, I recognize that name. I feel like I've bought stuff from them in the past, but for the life of me, I can't remember what anymore. It's probably in one of my toolboxes for that kind of stuff. Um, cool. Let me ask you this. I know we're plowing away on time here.
no, it's fine. Go ahead.
What's speaking of time? In a typical shop day, is what do you think takes up too much of your time? Like on a typical day.
Well, I'll be the first to admit I am not a fast technician. I am not. Um, the biggest sticky wicket that I have in the shop that I work on is overhauls. Just and especially when dealing with those, you're you're essentially opening up a can of worms when you do an overhaul because you don't know what you're getting into until you take it apart.
It's not like
Um,
renovating a house. Like
right.
once you've opened the walls, oh, now it's full of black mold, or here's a family of raccoons, or like,
And when and it's hard it's definitely harder in like a school band and orchestra music shop repair shop because you're they want to get everything out as quickly as possible, and I understand why. Band directors have got a schedule to keep. They've got students that need to be able to play to earn their grade and all of that critical stuff. So not only that, you're not dealing the customers that I'm dealing with are not always bringing in five to 10,000 or 30 to $50,000 instruments, and are not professionals. So I have if I'm going to do it, a professional saxophone overhaul, it's very easy to spend 20 hours on that.
yeah.
A student saxophone, I got to get it out in about 8 to 10 hours.
Mm.
And that's there, but at the same time, that said student saxophone may come in and it's got, the bow is nearly crushed in because it fell off the football bleachers, and I got to get all of those dents out. Or it could be an older horn that this has been done to on more than one occasion. The metal is work hardened and fatigued, and I've got to try to make it look as pretty as possible, but I just can't do that because the horn is so worn out.
Yeah.
And all of that takes time. And you want it done right. If you want it done fast, there's sometimes there's things I'm just not going to be able to do to get the job done. So I have to pick and choose what I feel as though is within the best interests of the instrument.
Yes.
And that can be even more frustrating if, you've got a shop that's, got several technicians and you're not doing your own estimates. The technician that does the estimate may see things that they think are far more important and germane to repairing the instrument that I may not be in agreement with. And I feel as though it can be a very frustrating thing sometimes, and I have to try to work within those parameters. It's not easy. It can be very frustrating, but you learn to you eventually have to learn to work within the certain confines of what you have. And it's very rare that I have a rough situation. I had one come back that was became a rather stressful moment last week, but it was the time prior to that was almost 6 months ago. So,
Mm.
it's, I can't, it, I will never say that I'm a great technician. I don't like, I don't like putting that kind of pressure on myself, but I do the best I can with what I have to do. I'm not perfect. I'm a flesh and blood, flawed individual, just like everybody else. And I'm gonna make mistakes sometimes. The bottom line is figure out what I did wrong, so that way when I go forward, I know what to look for and what I ultimately have to do to try not to cause that same problem to come back and bite me again.
Yeah, I I'm glad you put it. Was it pick your battles?
Yeah,
I've seen that. Like I'll that's like story of my life for a lot of my teaching and most of my life stuff. Like it's not going to be smooth, and you have to develop that skill to kind of prioritize and deal with what you have.
exactly.
Um, and this even to me, this goes back to our earlier discussion about the direction of instruments, and like the player control versus the instrument controlling the
Hmm.
player. Like um the bottom fell out there. If I remember what I was about to erupt there, I'll come back to it. But yeah, picking your battle, the basic point, picking your battles is a big idea for a lot of different things.
Hmm.
I'm happy to see it play out for this as well. Um, let's see what you're. I mean, I guess when we're freely playing again, I'm assuming we're gonna start playing again at some point publicly. But given everything you've been into now, do you have any particular artistic or professional goals in mind that you still want to hit, like moving forward?
Well, that's a tough one, Frank. I not to or figuratively toot my own horn. Um, you know, I have I got very, very blessed to be able to play and at least from a performance standpoint, play some really great opportunities. I mean, I was 17 years old when when I did those gigs opening up for the Duke Ellington Orchestra. Um, I've gotten to play at Symphony Center 4 times now.
Nice.
That was a dream. Uh, I've played with, I've subbed in the horn section with the Blues Brothers. I played in a backing orchestra with James Taylor. Uh, I opened up for Coco Taylor at a blues festival 10 years ago. So, and I'm sure there's several other things. I played at the Green Mill when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
That was one of my first professional gigs.
I've drank at
Now,
Green Mill.
so it's, I was very, very lucky and very blessed, and I wouldn't trade any of those opportunities for the world. And it's still a thrill to get up every day and know that I've done repair work for people in the Chicago Symphony, the New York Philharmonic, the Indianapolis Symphony, the Atlanta Symphony, and dozens of university professors across the country. That's been no small feat in itself. And in the last 2 to 3 years, I'm starting to evolve from doing repair work to designing bassoons nowadays. So if I the one goal that my business partner and I both share is I want to be able to, if I at least build one bassoon from scratch before I leave this earth that embodies and proves my points on everything that I've been discussing and preaching to the bassoon world for the last 16 years, that will be very satisfying to me.
Right, it
So,
sounds
but
like a good
just
goal.
generally, I guess the thing that I can at least to summarize, I just hope when I leave this world, I didn't leave it the way I found it. That's the biggest thing. I just want to know that I made a difference, both in my craft and as a human being.
That's a good goal to set. I wish you success with that, because I would love I would love to live in a world where I can tell people to wrap their lips around a Chad.
I love it. I love it.
But yeah, I mean, that's awesome. Do you feel like from where we are right now, how far away do you feel like that is? Like, are you in like prototyping stages, or are we like?
Well, we're still ironing out and refining the composite bassoon right now.
Okay.
We're the tonal design and the acoustics of it are about exactly where we want it. I spent the COVID has been a blessing in disguise from that perspective, because it gave me a lot of time and opportunity to sit down and tinker with it more.
Lots
You
and
know,
lots of time, yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I have plugged and re-drilled more tone holes on the guinea pig horn than I care to mention at this point, and I've got it just about where I ultimately want it, and I've got a couple more key work options that I want to amalgamate into the composite bassoon to, and it's not that it's bad now. I want to make it kind of a sophisticated Chevy Cavalier in a lot of ways.
Right.
Something that, it's inexpensive, it's priced so most people can buy it, but it's got all of even the few extra features that make it really desirable to play up to the professional level. So I'm finishing that, and then there's some subtle things within the mechanics themselves that I want to improve upon. I don't want the factory in Taiwan to do it, just because I'll get into a little bit of length on that. When you have instruments built overseas by Taiwan and China, the problem is it's really hard for you to have anything that's proprietary. If they're building instruments that are similar, they'll sell whatever you added for no extra cost to somebody else. So
I've
there
seen
are
that a
little
lot.
things, yeah. So there's little things within the instrument that I'm not happy about that I can do here proprietary to make it an even more rigid and sturdy instrument. So we're going to change. We're working towards changing some of the key work itself, and we'll have some of the key work that we're going to change made here. That will help make it a little bit more rigid and hold adjustment better. I'm hoping the biggest problem with China and Taiwan as far as their mechanics, they still haven't quite figured out ergonomics really well yet. So I'm trying to figure out ways to make the horn a little bit more ergonomically friendly. It's not terrible. And for the price point that we're selling the horn at, I wasn't trying to make it, my premise is as you probably have figured out from listening to me talk through this interview, is I wanted to make an instrument that acoustically and sonically played like a much more professional instrument. I wasn't as concerned about the mechanics, and the refinement of said mechanics. I wanted the horn to sound and play a certain way.
Mm.
My biggest competitor, that I'm going against, is Fox, and Fox makes a nice instrument. It's built well. The ergonomics are pretty good on it, but I never liked the sound or the playability of it. I want an instrument that sounds like a fine Heckle instrument, and we're definitely hitting on that, on the house style of what we want acoustically and sound wise. Now I want to go back and start looking at things to make it just a little bit better from the ergonomics and mechanical efficiency standpoint of it.
I see. Well, it's exciting to hear about, and like I said, good luck with it. I know, like, trying to get any kind of product to market from concept is a lot of work, and there's a lot of.
It's been a chore. I'm not going to deny it. If anything, that was the biggest thing that we just introduced this thing to the general public, not this in July of 2019. So it really had not been out on the market that long when COVID hit. So it was like, it's been a fight, but we're still moving horns. We're not moving them as fast as we'd like them to, but we're still moving them nonetheless. And the best thing that I keep hearing is, every time there's been a few guys that have played the horn since we first introduced it in July to right before COVID hit, and they were pleasantly surprised at even how much better I made the horn even from that, in that small time frame. There were a lot of more bugs that I worked out, but the only way the fortunate thing that I was able to do with that was I just kept me and my business partner kept taking the horn around, and we just kept getting feedback. We just kept taking more and more. Any person that was willing to sit down and play the thing, we had them play it, and we took notes, and we listened really hard and really careful.
Yeah.
And we feel like we're still very confident and very proud of where we've gotten with it. That I said to him the other day when I talked to him on the phone, I said, that horn, I said, you do realize that horn is my child at this point. I said, I have spent more time coddling and nurturing that thing since the day I first worked on one. So that thing has become my labor of love out of anything that I'm doing right now, and I'm extremely proud of it. So
Nice. Is there any kind of website or contact info specifically about that I can post in the show notes for you?
I'll send you the details on that when we get off, Frank.
Okay.
Just because I have to double check everything.
Yeah,
It's been
no
a
worries.
while since
Yeah,
I've even looked at the website.
Anything you want to share,
Sure.
shoot it to me, and I'll put it in the show notes later on. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about this project as well. I'm interested to see how it takes off. Also, I'm going to remain curious about the ins and outs of the manufacturing, because we've played around with that a little bit with the knife business, and some of it actually came back to bite us. I won't go into too much because this is the clarinet stuff,
Right.
but let's say we had some designs and ideas, and we had U.S. manufacturer at one point, but because of the way the way the industry is, we ended up basically getting some design elements unknowingly co-opted by our manufacturer. Kind of like what you were talking about with so intellectual property. It can be a little weird in that industry, but it's left us more cautious. And like you were saying earlier, like, we do a lot more in-house now because of that.
Yeah. The biggest things that I've learned in this business, and I've learned to appreciate and absolutely hate this word, but having control is it's a real critical thing. You
Yeah.
know, that, I understand why businesses that produce any type of product, that's why they have dozens of lawyers and hundreds of thousands of paper trails with all of this stuff. It's to cover their own butts, and it's the only way that you can maintain control of stuff. I mean, one of the big thing, this whole composite bassoon thing evolved from this octave vent system that my bassoon repair teacher helped develop and design. And we've went through almost 5 major evolutions with this thing, and we're finally at the point where we really think it's at its best yet, and it's the simplest design yet. And the first and foremost thing that my business partner, who owns the business rights to all of this, he finally did. He said, "I'm getting this patented." He said, "I am not going to let Fox or any of our competitors get their hands on this without paying for it." And I really think that was one of the smartest moves that he made at this point, because this has been this octave vent system has been 20 years in the making. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let Fox, Heckle, or any bassoon maker just come in and take it from him. It's not right, nor is it fair. So
I've heard a lot of similar stories from my other tech friends. Like they play things very close to the vest. If they come up with something good, it's like because they're the same deal. Like everyone's afraid of the big companies coming down and just swiping your idea. And then like what seems comforting, at least for something that you can like design and patent, it's that protection of that. With I know from the knife world, like it's harder to do have intellectual property when it's like a knife is kind of a knife, and people copy each other all the time, and sometimes it's accepted, sometimes it's frowned upon. But for something like, let's say, like your what you were just talking about, the octave
vent system.
Yeah, like at least that's something you can put on paper, and like, here's what it is, and let's get it protected.
Yep.
um I I feel I feel bad. I want to help. I want to be able to help some of my friends who are like trying to innovate, but then don't want to suffer from theft. Like,
right.
at what? Let me ask you this: what was the process like to get that protected by patent? Like, how?
I can't talk a ton about that, because since my business partner owns the designs and the rights to the octave vent system,
Okay.
he was the one that took care of all of that.
All right.
He called me. He stopped here on his way up to the patent attorney, and we talked at great lengths when he was finished. Fortunately enough, for the musical instrument specific case of this, the guy, the attorney that filed all of the paperwork, was a trumpet player, so he was very understanding of the explanation of how it works and why it works and what all it does. I know there's definitely money exchange that's involved in getting a patent done, and it's not cheap. But when it comes to anything, a tangible item that has any design uniqueness that nobody else is doing, it is definitely worthwhile to get it documented. It's your insurance policy.
Yeah. If I mean, I don't know. I'm not asking you for private information, but I think people would benefit from learning more about that process, especially if we want to see innovation in the field. Like, I would love to have people be confident to innovate, but not be held back by the fear of getting robbed. So
Right.
maybe is that particular patent lawyer open to being contacted?
I'd have to I'd have to check. I can find out for you though.
If they are, I'd be happy to put their info down, because I feel
Okay.
like, especially if somebody's watching an episode like this where it's very kind of tech heavy, and
Hmm.
maybe they have their ideas of what they want to produce. Like, I think that would be pretty helpful for
Okay.
the innovating tech out there somewhere.
And a lot, fortunately, the upside to it too, and some of it can be confusing, but there's a wealth of information about applying for patents online. I do know that at this point. So, best thing I could suggest in that route is just, get on the old Google and
Yeah, do your research and
do your research.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the more we talk about it, it becomes so important. Like, because I hate to see I hate to see development frozen because of fear of theft. And
Yeah.
having suffered from some of that myself, like we plow forward because, for at least for the knives, like that's been part of that's the nature of the industry.
Hmm.
Um, but and seeing cool things happen in the music world, like I'd love to facilitate that for more and more people, so that they,
Yeah, of
like,
course.
I want to see the industry explode with crazy innovation, and see what, I don't know. I'm thinking of my old '90s, the promise of flying cars and like a condo on Mars or whatever. Like, I'm still a big believer in a bright future with plenty of innovation. So if I can
Absolutely.
facilitate that with my tiny YouTube/podcast, why not? Let me ask you this. We'll wind up a bit. We've been talking a lot about music and tech stuff.
Mhm.
What else do you do? What else do you like to do?
Well, I in my free time, I still like to go out and clay target shoot. I've been doing that since I was 10 years old, and it was one of the few things that, sports-wise, that I really gravitated towards. Um, uh, when I was in high school, I used to bowl competitively. I don't do it as much anymore. My arm
Yeah.
uh, it's got tennis elbow really bad, so it's painful when I do that. Uh, but it's most of my time. It's I've told younger people nowadays. If you're going to be in the music business, this is not a 9 to 5 job. It's just not. Um, and it's not, you pretty much, it's not a job. It becomes a way of life. And at this point in my life, I'm still glad to be in the game respectively well, and doing what I do. But my most of my time is wrapped up with either working on horns, trying to squeeze some practice time in, make bassoon reads, or in my case, more so now than I used to. I really try to take a concerted amount of time to try to rest and sleep.
Wow. Big
The
deal.
part of the reason why I have kidney problems is because I would, I would run on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and then to stay awake, I would drink coffee and Red Bull and
Yeah.
smoke 5 cigars a day to keep me going, and I can't do that anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so
People
I
people take that stress
sleeping
and
is my
recovery thing
hobby.
for granted. Yeah. No, yeah, I was going to mention that part of our relationship beyond the music world is we both share. I think we both share a love for good red meat, brown liquor, and a good cigar.
Well, hey, Frank, you've known me long enough to know that I abide by the Ron Swanson diet. So, you
Yes.
know,
When yeah, we're gonna have to, at some point we need to make a day of it.
Absolutely, it's been, dude. I've missed going out for cocktails and dinner with you, buddy.
Yeah, the I mean, oh man, the people hearing people talk about, the like everyone's orchestra experience is basically shut off right now because
Yeah.
we're just not like it for me, like of course there's the element of being able to play, like be a musician, but there's that whole social world around it, like
Yeah.
going out with your
Absolutely.
friends, you know, discussing the music that you just played, I mean, yeah, I can go to the grocery store and buy a steak and have a lonely meal alone, but there's this
Well, that's
whole
it.
that whole experience behind it too, the
Well, and
conversation.
that's why I say, the music, being in the music world, it's a way of life. All of my friends are musicians. Brad Uffelman and I he and I are extremely close friends. He and I, for long periods of time, he and I did just about everything together. And I mean, when I say we gigged together, we would go out to dinner together,
Mhm.
would go trap shooting together. I mean, we did everything together. But the people that I gig with are the same people that I go out and are my friends, and I have a social life with.
Yeah,
So, I've told numerous people, they asked me if anything about COVID that you miss. I said, I miss my friends. I said, I miss going out with them. I miss hugging my friends, for
right,
crying out
right.
loud.
That the physical contact. I was talking to this is from another facet of my life. My martial arts school. I was talking
Yeah.
to one of the parents earlier, and we were talking about this unfortunate rise of suicides in young people
Mhm.
over the last year, and it's because, in large part, it's because people are separate socially. Like
Yeah.
we're not wired to be this way very long, like
No.
cooped up. And I feel like, I mean, again, because this is going to be publicly aired, I'm not I'm not saying COVID is not bad, like don't cancel me for that. I am
No.
saying that there's so many people who are not considering these collateral issues,
Yeah.
like the
Oh, absolutely.
depression, the addiction problems, and it's stuff that's not as commonly addressed, compared to people getting vaccines or wearing masks. But like the whole health of the human being, like we need that physical and mental interaction with people. Like
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
however we deal with all of this, like it needs to include some of that as well. And I'm glad to see people's efforts of trying to do something, but I'm of the opinion we need to consider the like as much of the whole view as possible when
Absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
but yeah, would we'll definitely make a day of these things at some point. And next time you talk to Brad, I've been trying to message him too to be on here because I know we have a lot to talk about. I know uh, they they're expecting, right?
Yes, they are.
So I kind of figured it would be a little more difficult to get a hold of him, but if you happen to be talking to him, just let him know, because I would love to share his value with whatever audience we have
He's a
as
great
well.
guy, and he's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I consider it an honor and a privilege to call him a friend. He really came into my life at a time when I was really at a low point.
Mm.
And we that I think I tell this story with a degree of humor. Him and I are both very strong personalities, and I remember the first time I met him, and I told him, I said, I think our egos immediately got into a pissing contest before we were formally introduced. So, but Brad is, we definitely, from a playing perspective and a friendship perspective, I really like to think that he and I truly have brought out the best in each other in a lot of circumstances. And I think Brad's family, Brad's dad and Brad's mom, God rest her soul, were like second parents to me. I really, I think the world of all of them. And Rachel is just a fantastic lady. So I'm glad to have them as friends in my life. And they're, Brad is just, he's a great person and a great musician.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you guys have had more interaction together than I have. We just sit together and play clarinet.
Frank, it's, I remember saying, God, Brad and I have been playing together since, holy cow, since 2006.
Wow.
And it does, and you know what? It doesn't seem like it's been that long. But I really, I was almost at the point from my frustrations of taking auditions and just dealing with some of the drama and bullshit that goes on in orchestras. I was about ready to just put the bassoon down and not play it anymore. And Brad was one that really kind of gave me a kick in the ass and presented that challenge, like I talked about earlier, to keep doing it and to strive to be all that I could be as a musician. So,
That's
and at the same time, I knew that if I didn't do the same back to him, it would not go well. So he and I were definitely, we would push each other's buttons in the best ways possible.
nice. Hey, that's a great relationship, to have with anybody. You're building each other up in your own way.
Yep.
And I agree, the kind of suspension of the passage of time, like a lot of my best friends, like, I may have known them for years and years, and maybe we don't see each other for years and years, but when we get back together, it's as if time is not, like, it's as if that we pick up where we left off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's great. I'm looking forward to when we can all be normal humans again and
Yeah.
enjoy
Me too, buddy.
with each
Me
other.
too.
Um, let's see. Uh, let me dig deep here. We'll wrap it up soon.
Okay.
What's something that you used to believe that you don't believe anymore? And it doesn't have to be. I give everyone this caveat. It doesn't have to be like this earth shattering revelation or anything. I've had some people say, like, well, I used to get custom mouthpieces, and now I'm okay with off the shelf or
Does it have to be
something.
music related, or can it be something more philosophical towards life?
Anything you feel like sharing, that I don't have to potentially bleep out or anything.
Um, this one's going to be a deep one. The family that your blood family is not always necessarily your real family.
Hmm.
Um, I fortunately I have a mother, a brother, a sister-in-law, a half brother, a half sister-in-law, a niece, uh, three nephew or two grandnephews and a grandniece that I'm related to by blood that I love dearly. I absolutely adore them, and I would do anything for them. A lot of my extended family, however, I some of them I haven't seen in 17 to 20 years for a lot of very over dramatic but yet very negatively impacted differences. And those are, as much as I would like to love them and have them in my life, I can't do that. There's too much scorched earth in the past, and the people that I consider my family are not people that I'm necessarily blood related to. They're just people that treat me with the respect and courtesy that a human being should be treated with, and I know that will be there for me when push has come to shove. And a few of them have seen me in my most dire hours sometimes, and those are the people that I consider more family than I do my own bloodline family.
That's, yeah, it's something I resonate with too. I mean, you know, it's going back to me. This is like going back to our connections with people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and this whole interview, I feel like it started with talking about the positive people in your life that have been, like, by, luck and work have brought you, like, these great achievements, but I think also, like, there's people who need to hear that, like, you have to take more control over the type of people who are in your circle, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, for as much as a good teacher or a good mentor will benefit you, if you willfully keep harmful people in your life, it's not going to do you any good, I don't think,
No, it doesn't, and unfortunately, one that, in my immediate family, I had one extremely toxic person in my life for almost 40 years, and that person almost caused probably one of the greatest detriments, if it wasn't just for, you know, uh, my mom escaping. Be that as it may, though, I you can't necessarily choose who you're related to by blood, whether you like it or not. Um, I I love my family. The ones that I've had, that my immediate family and myself have had irreconcilable differences with. I still love them in a way, but I don't like them.
Yeah,
Um,
that seems valid. I mean, I think the human relationship component is not always, like, black and white, like easy or clear. Like, I think, individual people are complex, and I
mhm.
think that's what we ought to expect out of our relationships with each other too. Like, um, but yeah, I mean, and I agree too. Like, some of those things are outside of your control, like the
Yeah,
family you're born into. Certainly, like, that's not something you have a little checklist
no,
on.
no,
But
no. But I will say one other thing, that I believe more now than I did when I was younger, because of all the stuff I just talked about. Uh, my faith in God has definitely gotten much stronger because of that. I really have, the core things that I believe in more than anything are my faith, my family, and hard work. Those three core values I think are more important than anything else in this world. I don't, from a monetary value, I'm not a rich man by any stretch of the means. I consider myself a very rich man for the people that I have in my life and for the experience that I've had in my life. Those are the things that matter more to me than any dollar value.
yeah, well, I this whole interview to me has been, kind of proof of that, like I see value in you that I want to share. And it's, well, we've been, I
Well,
don't know how
thank
long
you,
we've been
Frank.
talking, a
That
couple
means a lot.
hours now. But yeah, it's, I feel like this is something, our audience, hopefully growing audience, will appreciate and hopefully uh, grow from.
Well, I'm definitely glad to do it, and I am definitely glad to call you a friend and a colleague.
I appreciate it. I feel the same way. Is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
I can't think of anything. I mean, we covered a lot of
Yeah,
ground.
been around the map.
This is one of those conversations that I refer to my business partner with is we're solving the mysteries of the universe
Right.
with, you know?
Well, yeah, you, me, and then everyone listening, and I hope that's what they're getting out of it. Um, what are you? We talked a lot about it already. What are you working on now, and where can people find you? And again, I'll
Well,
put this in the show notes as well. But if you want to give a shout out to whatever it is you want to promote.
right now I'm still working into, I'm still doing Bassoon Repair independently, and I'm still aggressively promoting that. My website is chadtaylorwoodwinds.com. There, my contact information is there. So if anybody has questions about general repair, bassoon repair, especially, uh, my work and my projects that I'm working on within the bassoon world, they can reach me that way. Uh, the business that I'm affiliated with the composite bassoon and the octavent system, if you Google Weisberg Systems, you can find our web page that way. We don't have anything on the composite bassoon up yet. We're still slow on the trigger to revamp the website to include the composite bassoon, partly because when we initially marketed the things, we were selling the things so damn fast we couldn't get them in stock fast enough. So good problem to
Yeah,
have,
very
but
good
it
problem.
really put us behind schedule on getting all of the other logistical stuff in place, which, like I said, it's a good problem. So
Yeah.
other than that, as far as groups that I perform with, uh, there's various Facebook pages out there. If you want to check Facebook for the group Abby Normal, I play saxophone in that group. Another group, it's a larger group with a full horn section called the Demolition Men. That's another group that I'm a part of. My classical stuff, I'm obviously a member of the West Suburban Symphony. I'm first call sub for contrabassoon in the Peoria Symphony, and once in a blue moon the Knox Galesburg Symphony calls. So it's a little hard to get there for their rehearsals
Yeah.
when I've got, but I'm glad to be on their call list at least. So
I think I was on there once long ago. I remember Ginsberg contacted me, and like at some point I found myself on that list, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember ever applying. It was like,
it was funny when they called me. I was kind of surprised because nobody that I knew that was playing in that orchestra anymore, and they called and I said, "How the hell did you get my number?"
right.
And they said, "Well, they said the personnel manager at the Peoria Symphony gave us your contact information."
Okay.
It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense now. So
Yeah, there we go. The power of a positive network yet again.
that's right. That's right. So
But Chad, I appreciate you taking so much time. Again, I think it's a great value. Um, we'll hit me up after this. We'll figure out a time to do our Ron Swanson nights.
you
Uh,
got it, dude.
but yeah, I appreciate it again, Chad Taylor. His information is going to be in the description below, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right,
Thanks, Frank. It was an honor and a pleasure.
appreciate it.